Welcome back to the Spirit of Independence. This is Lesson 3, A Call to Arms. In this lesson, we have 3 topics. Topic 1, a meeting in Philadelphia. Topic 2, fighting begins. And topic 3, more military action. Related vocabulary. This one's kind of short with the related vocabulary. Our first word is Minutemen during the Revolutionary Era. Civilians sworn to be ready to fight with only 1 minute's notice. Loyalists, American colonists who remained loyal to Britain and opposed the war for independence. And patriot, American colonists who favored American independence. So our before reading scan, and just a quick scan of this one, you can see it looks long, but we're going to do it in 3 very short presentations. Obviously, we're starting with a meeting in Philadelphia. What meeting? The delegates vote. What delegates? And the colonial militias. Well, what are they doing? Yeah, I'm not getting a straight answer here as to what's going on. Okay, fighting begins will be the second one. Great Britain sends troops. What a shock. The British on the move. And Lexington and Concord. Okay, not too many questions I can ask for that one. It's pretty self-explanatory. Third is more military action. The Battle of Bunker Hill and choosing sides. As we read, our during reading strategies are make connections, relating information I know with the subject I'm reading, comparing my experiences with the reading, interacting with text, looking for main idea and supporting details, looking at how the text is organized, and additionally considering historical inferences such as compare contrast, cause and effect, continuity and change, historical relevance, historical context, and periodization. We'll clarify understanding through the use of the photographs, charts, and other graphics to help us understand what we're reading and determine fact and opinion. Once our during reading strategies are done and we've read, we have our after reading strategies. Recall. In this case, we'll recall by summarizing and writing. We'll respond by drawing logical conclusions about the topic, and forming our own opinion about what we've read. And we'll evaluate the reading, looking through the selection, seeing how the author used evidence to reach conclusions, looking for objectivity or bias in the reading. Again, this is a strategy often used more often with document analysis than textbook reading, but here we can draw inferences, we can note insights as we finish reading. So with our during and after reading strategies done, let's get right into the text. A meeting in Philadelphia. So what meeting? Well, let's look at our questions. What role did key individuals play in the movement toward independence? And what was the purpose of the Continental Congress? Now, I have a funny feeling that's our meeting. It's probably this Continental Congress. So again, questions sometimes convey or give away answers. So I bet our meeting has something to do with this Continental Congress. And what motivates people to act? What motivates people to act? What's going to lead people to do things? We'll look at that in this lesson. So let's get to the first part. In September of 1774, 55 delegates gathered in Philadelphia. They had to set up a political body that would represent Americans and challenge British control. The delegates called this body the Continental Congress. And if you're not following along with me, I am on page 120. Leaders from 12 of the 13 colonies attended the meeting. Only Georgia did not send a representative. Massachusetts sent fiery Samuel Adams and his lawyer cousin, John Adams. New York sent John Jay, another lawyer. Virginia sent George Washington, as well as Richard Henry Lee and Patrick Henry, 2 outspoken defenders of colonial rights. Patrick Henry wanted the colonies to unite in firm resistance to Britain. He summed up the meaning of the meeting when he addressed the delegates on its second day. And I'm quoting him: "The distinctions between Virginians, Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers, and New Englanders are no more. I am not a Virginian, but an American." And again, it's Patrick Henry at the Continental Congress in 1774. So what's being conveyed here is important. Well, what I know, the coercive acts, called the intolerable acts by the colonists, this is what united them together in this Continental Congress. So the British plan of dividing the colonies, it backfires. It doesn't work the way they expect it to. Instead, the colonies are united by this. They're driven together. They realize that if Massachusetts can have their rights taken away, all of them can. So they decide to unite together and to stand against the British as a single unit, as united colonies. So this is pretty amazing when you think about it. If you go back to the Albany Plan of Union, they couldn't do this before. So fighting the French, fighting an external enemy that might have invaded them, that wasn't good enough. But having their rights taken away from them, having the representation taken away from them, that was worth fighting over. I always find it to be an interesting insight. So question and answer. Samuel Adams, John Jay, George Washington, Richard Henry Lee, and Patrick Henry were key individuals in the Continental Congress. Patrick Henry believed in a united America. So we see this for the first time, where the idea of coming together and getting things done is very important. So the delegates vote. So what do they vote on? Let's find out. The delegates discussed complaints against the British. Then they voted. In a statement of grievances, now a grievance is like a complaint, a formal complaint, the delegates called for the repeal of 13 acts of Parliament. They believe these laws violated the laws of nature, the principles of the English Constitution, and several charters of the colonies. The delegates voted to boycott British trade. The colonies would not import or use any British goods, nor would they sell their goods in Great Britain. Continental Congress delegates also decided to endorse the Suffolk Resolves, prepared by the people of Boston and other Suffolk County towns in Massachusetts. These resolutions declared the coercive acts to be illegal. They called on the county's residents to arm themselves against the British. After the delegates endorsed the resolves, other colonies also organized militias, groups of citizen soldiers. What I know. Violations of the Magna Carta and opposition to Mercantilist policies seem to define the colonial opposition to the British. You'll note that right off the bat. Direct connection here. So they saw these as violations to the Magna Carta. And again, going back to the Navigation Acts, going back a few units, these mercantilist policies were the two things that they are very much opposed to. Sequence of events here. Continental Congress actions. They called for the repeal of 13 acts of Parliament, voted to boycott British goods, and endorsed the Suffolk Resolves. And militias are formed, and you can get an idea where this is all going. If you haven't seen it already, you should get it now. The colonial militias. American colonists had a long tradition of serving and protecting their communities in militias. Members of a militia were an important part of each town's defense. Militia members trained and had drills with the other citizen soldiers. They practiced using muskets and cannons. Each member was required to provide his own weapon, usually a musket, and ammunition. Later, as tension between Great Britain and the colonies grew, towns began to gather and store military supplies. Again, a personal observation. Community volunteerism even extended to protecting communities where people lived. Remember, these are communities that don't have police. They don't have a defense force. There's really no army here. Yeah, the British are there, but the British are watching the colonists. So to protect your own town, you needed these militias, and that's why they were so important to communities back then. Cause and effect. Continental Congress supported the Suffolk Resolves, which led many communities to prepare for direct military conflict. If you're looking at these Suffolk Resolves and going, well, wait a minute, this could lead to armed conflict. Yeah, it could lead to armed conflict. How about that? So, and this was backed by the Continental Congress. They said they should do this. And on page 121, the Massachusetts Community Prepares, notice 1774 right there. Note the great investment in weapon supplies in October 1774. They were preparing. Grape is round shot. It's what they fired usually from cannons. Some also considered round shot what was fired from muskets. You had bombshells, lead balls, gunpowder that charges the weapon. Bayonets, those are the large on the rifles. The bayonet was the knife that you'd have at the end of the rifle that you would use as a last resort when you ran out of ammunition. Flint or flintlock weapons, all these things were being stockpiled. And again, if you look at page 121, you'll see the price of all this stuff, like 300 pounds, 200 pounds. They were loading up. The communities were getting ready for some kind of armed conflict. Well, that ends this part of the reading. This is the section 103. And let's do a quick recall. A meeting in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress led to a united effort against the British, calling for the repeal of British policies and a boycott of British trade. The Congress also supported the Suffolk Resolves, which called the coercive acts illegal and for residents to arm themselves against the British. Our questions: what motivated many to act in regard to this crisis was the fear that the British treatment of Massachusetts would eventually spread to all the colonies and colonists. Take that back, all the colonies. And colonists would lose their individual rights and right to representative assemblies. So we mentioned that right at the beginning of the reading, and there's your answer. This is what's motivating people to act. They see that the treatment of Massachusetts could be the treatment of all colonies eventually. They could fall one by one or stand together. Individuals like Samuel Adams, John Jay, George Washington, Richard Henry Lee, and Patrick Henry played a major role in establishing policies of the Continental Congress. The purpose of the Continental Congress was to create a united front against British attacks on American freedoms. I think that basically sums it up. And evaluate. The Suffolk Resolves will set the stage for a potential conflict between the British and Americans because they promoted arming against the British. I mean, if you're getting weapons ready, that's usually a sign you're going to do something a little severe. So, and we're seeing that here at the end. Hey, so this wraps up the first section. This is our source information. Remember, this read along is created for educational use only. It's for a supplemental tool, should not be sold or purchased in any manner. It's just simply here to make you a better student. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next presentation.